and my debt actually increased from $80,000 to $108,000 when my divorce was finalized. And I had a Chase Freedom Card with almost $12,000 in balance. Back in 2013, I had $110,000 in credit card debt, personal loans, car loans, and a TSP loan, which is also known as the 401k loan. And I made a decision to sacrifice 2 years of my life from 2014 to 2016 to completely pay off $110,000 in total consumer debt. And I wanted to do whatever it took to pay it off. I sold everything and lived on nothing until I got that debt paid off. What I'm really glad I didn't do was file for bankruptcy when I could have, because that would have been much more devastating for my finances and potentially my military career at the time. And take a look at this one more picture of me from 10 years ago. In 2013, I looked like a freaking dork at my job's holiday party, and I was on active duty in the military at the time, and I knew that I was in serious financial trouble. I didn't tell my employer about it. My family and friends had no idea at the time that I had so much debt, making only $58,000 a year. I was living paycheck to paycheck, making minimum payments on every single debt that I had. It was probably the darkest time of my life. It took a big toll on my mental health and prevented me from doing a lot of things that I wanted to do. And I was smiling in this picture, but in my mind, I was thinking about how I was going to tackle my $110,000 in total debt while I was in the middle of a divorce. This picture means something to me because my stress level was 10 out of 10 going into the new year, despite the smile I showed in this picture. And my debt actually increased from $80,000 to $108,000 when my divorce was finalized. But by no means am I blaming my entire financial mistakes on my divorce. Some of the debt was because of the divorce, but most of it was because I had a serious spending problem. And I think a lot of people can share similar experiences that when you go through a major life-changing event, that is the most vulnerable time for someone to make a financial mistake or multiple financial mistakes. The biggest downside of all was how much I slowed down on the progress of my retirement savings because of the debt that I had. Let me know in the comment section down below about your experience with debt so far. And this is the screenshot of my debt from December 2013. I still keep a copy of it as a reminder of my past. I had a Capital One MasterCard with $6,000 in balance. I had a military Star Card with over $8,000 in balance. If you've ever served in the military Star Card is pretty much the first thing you'll learn about when you get to your first assignment. And I think they are just as predatory as any credit cards. And I also had another Capital One Visa and with almost $9,000 in total balance. And I remember using this credit card mostly for eating out and buying drinks. Yeah. And I had a Chase Freedom Card with almost $12,000 in balance. And keep in mind that every single one of my 5 credit cards was completely maxed out or over the credit limit. Not to mention the USAA credit card with almost $12,000 in balance. I had anywhere between 20 and 28% in interest for these credit cards. My minimum payment was $120 every month, but out of that $120, $80 of that was going to the interest and $40 to the principal. And I was not going to be able to pay off the credit cards for like 30 or 40 years by making minimum payments. And I also had a 2013 Honda Civic with a balance of almost $23,000. The minimum payment was $313, and that's for 60 months. And I just got that car, so it slowly became a burden on me. The Acura loan here was actually from the divorce with a balance of almost $20,000. Did I need 2 cars? Of course not. And I'll tell you how I got rid of it in the next segment of this live stream, so make sure to stay tuned. The next one was the TSP loan right here, which is the same as the 401k loan. TSP stands for Thrift Savings Plan, which is the federal government version of the 401k. A 401k is for employees working in the private sector, and TSP is for members of the armed forces and civilian employees of the federal government. And I remember taking out $12,000 under the what's called a hardship rule so that I could pay for my everyday expenses. And the last one was a personal loan with USAA. And I borrowed $9,000 for 60 months. And the interest rate was outrageous at 12% because I had a poor credit score. And I needed that money to pay for my divorce attorney. And I'll tell you that, man, it'll cost you 20 bucks to get married, but a fortune to get divorced. And needless to say, I no longer do any banking with USAA. And like many of you watching this video, I wasn't born into a rich family. My family and I immigrated to the US in the late 90s. And I remember how much we didn't have. But we were fortunate to have support from my grandparents, who also immigrated to the US, but they already lived in the US for over 20 years by the 90s. My grandparents came to the US in the late 1970s and worked their butts off because they believed in the American dream. They believed this country would give them a better life than where they were before. My grandfather passed away 2 years ago at the age of 94, and then my grandmother passed away about 8 months later at the age of 95. And they were married for almost 70 years. And when I came to the US, I couldn't speak any English at all. So naturally, I got picked on at school. I graduated from high school with no intentions of going to college. So I decided to enlist in the Air Force at the age of 18. And it was a few years after the 9/11 attacks happened. And I got my US citizenship. I got fluent in English. And then I made some bad financial decisions. And this was me in 2014, right in the middle of paying off my debt. And there were times when I thought, oh man, I'm never gonna pay off my debt. And I had ups and downs, but I was living on almost nothing that year. And then this was in December 2015 with my daughter at her daycare center. And I looked much happier because I just sent my last check to pay off my very last debt. And it took me 2 whole years to pay everything off. And what have I been doing since I paid off my debt in 2016? I took my daughter to Disneyland, Legoland, Disney World, and Disney Cruise. My wife and I traveled to New York, Hawaii, Oregon, Washington, and so many different places. And cash flow my travel without ever taking out any more debt, right? I'm gonna be 37 this year, and my wife and I now collectively have over 7 figures in total assets, which include our retirement accounts. And I didn't do anything special. I started to save and invest at least 50% of my income after I paid off my debt at the end of 2015. My income didn't stay at $61,000 after 2015. It just continued to increase every year because I found opportunities to raise my income after getting a bachelor's degree at the age of 33. It also took another 6 months to build my emergency fund, and then another 6 months to build my travel fund, annual expenses fund, and other sinking funds. And I started to build a business mindset by creating several side hustles to increase my income. And I didn't build my net worth in just a year, but it's taken me over 10 years to get to where I am now. And my journey started in 2013 when I realized that I could no longer live paycheck to paycheck. And I want you to take a guess at my credit score in 2013. What do you think it was? I'll give you a minute, okay? And it was, ready? 578 when I looked at it. And I couldn't take out any more loans, credit cards, or anything else to pay for my lifestyle anymore. My payment history was actually in an excellent category because I never missed a payment in my life, but it was the credit usage or the amounts owed that was killing my credit score. My credit card usage was at 99%. So I literally had nothing more left in my credit limit. On one of my credit cards, I had a credit limit of $12,000 and I had a balance of $12,050. And I was completely out of control. Now, 10 years later, in 2023, my credit score is now about 825, 830 because I paid off all of my debt except for my mortgage. And I never put myself into that situation again. I want to share the steps I took in 2013 to get my debt-free journey started on January 1st, 2014. Step number 1 was to take full responsibility for my actions. This was the hardest thing that I had to do because I used to blame everyone else but myself. I had to take a great mental step to admit to my spending problem. And I had a serious spending problem, and no one else could fix it but me. And step number two was to find resources that could help me get out of debt. The very first book I read was The Millionaire Next Door. That's why I have that book on display on my bookshelf, because it made a huge impact on how I look at finances. The book offered practical advice on finding financial success and building generational wealth. It was published back in 1996, and I still find the book very relevant today. This is a book that I think every high school needs to make its students read before they graduate. Now you can visit firesightshare.com/shopping to get the affiliate link to that book. The next book I read was Rich Dad Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. That book, and The Millionaire Next Door are the reasons why I created this channel. I wanted to develop my own unique path to achieve financial independence or financial freedom. I don't know if you know this, but my channel name is actually, well, it's called Fireside Chat, and FIRE stands for Financial Independence and Retire Early. My videos are all about investing, budgeting, and paying off debt. I also have free financial resources that you can download for absolutely free by visiting firesightshare.com/resources. And I also help my private clients achieve financial freedom. And I encourage you to schedule a free session by visiting firesidechat.com/coaching to find out if I'm the right fit for your needs. But anyway, step 3 was to take control of my money. And I had no idea where my money was going and how much was coming in. This was when I created my own spreadsheet to keep track of my income, expenses, and debt, also known as a budget. It's called a budget, right? 10 years later, I am still trying to perfect my budget because circumstances have changed numerous times. I got remarried, right? Remarried last year. But when I was on my debt-free journey from 2014 to 2016, I wanted to stick to one budget that was going to prioritize paying off my debt. And step number 4 was to stop the bleeding by not taking out any more debt. That means I had to stop using my credit cards after I made my minimum payments. I threw away my credit cards and strictly used my debit card for the next 2 years. Do I use credit cards now? Absolutely. But I haven't carried a balance on my credit card in 8 years now. Credit cards can become very dangerous if you spend money like I did without a care in the world. But they can also be very rewarding if you budget your expenses and pay your credit cards off every single month. But don't get me wrong, you're not gonna be able to build wealth with credit card rewards, right? You should only use them if you're responsible enough to pay them off every single month. And many people believe that paying off debt is all about spreadsheets and math. The fact is that you can't get out of the paycheck to paycheck cycle if you can't change your mindset about money. Most of the time, it's about your behavior. You could be making $250,000 a year and still living paycheck to paycheck. I made a video about that because about 35% of Americans making $250,000 a year are living paycheck to paycheck. That's quite scary to just think about it, right? But there are also people who retire comfortably making less than $100,000 a year. It is all about the mindset and what you do with your money. And just because you're a spender, it doesn't mean that you're gonna be terrible at budgeting. I am a natural spender now, but I spend my money with intention. Ever since I became debt-free in 2016, I've been able to save, invest, and spend with the money I actually have instead of borrowing from my credit cards. My family and I went to Disney World using a Disney credit card, but I paid the balance in full and earned rewards from it. And I took my wife to New York for a weekend and used the Marriott credit card, but I paid the balance in full and earned extra points by staying at a Marriott near, what was that called? Times Square. The point is that if I spend everything I make, I'm gonna be broke like I used to be. But if I save everything I make, then I'm not gonna have any joy in my life, right? And I found that balance between intentional saving and intentional spending. It was much better when I paid off my debt. And the truth is, there are many people who spend money so that they can feel good about it. There are people who never budget because it's too stressful for them. And I know someone who would hide their debt and never deal with it. And that's also called money avoidance, which is very common in this country. When I realized the amount of debt I had to first overcome my fear, anxiety, and intense worry about my current financial state. Once I've mitigated my negative emotions about money, I started creating a debt payoff plan, which I'm going to show you in the next segment of this live stream. If you're watching this on replay or the clip, just go to my debt payoff playlist and find the next video.